Good evening. Welcome to the Mike's Mets podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota. The New York Mets won a thriller Sunday evening against the Philadelphia Phillies, 2-1. Brandon Nimmo hit a tie-breaking sixth-inning home run off of Zach Wheeler, and Edwin Diaz pulled off maybe his best performance of the season with a six-out save to bring the Mets to 87-69 on the season. They hold off the Philadelphia Phillies from potentially clinching the NL East at Citi Field. Final game of the season at Citi Field, so huge moment. Mets have now won 18 of their last 23 games, pushes them now season high 18 games over 500. The Mets pass, for the moment, Arizona into the end, take over the second of the three NL wildcard spots, ahead of the Diamondbacks and the Braves. And it sets up a showdown between the Mets and Atlanta. Coming up next, it's going to be in a massive series of huge implications. Mets are going to have their three best hurlers coming up for them in the next game coming up. In the next series coming up, and we'll see them put up. It will be Tuesday, Luis Severino; Wednesday, David Peterson; Thursday, Sean Manaea. And it is going to be there is really no way to describe how big this is going to be. I mean, this is a potential wild card clinching series. If the Mets can take 2 out of 3 from the Braves, it sets up a huge moment for them. So let's just to go over what exactly the Mets' magic number is here. So if the Mets win 2 games against the Braves, their magic number against them would be reduced to 1. Or a tie for a wild card with Atlanta. But if they win 2, it would also net the Mets the tiebreaker against Atlanta, which in turn would clinch at least the 3rd wild card spot. So winning 2 out of 3 games gets the Mets down to 1 game, just 1 game. So like if the Mets don't sweep, the Mets would have to sweep the series in Atlanta to clinch the wild card spot. But if they win 2 out of 3, even regardless of what happens for the remainder of the season, for the final 3 games against the Brewers, they're still going to be in a potential spot to clinch. So it is. I mean, I was saying this about a month ago that this is a series that will probably end up deciding the entire season for the Mets, and it just happens to be against the Braves. And I was having this discussion with my brother earlier this evening, basically that, okay, it sets up yet another series against the Braves 2 years ago, exactly, where it will be one of the 2 teams, either, in the case of 2022, which team would clinch the wild card, and which team would clinch the division, and it ended up being the Braves clinching the division because of it. Now, in this case, we have just 2 wild card spots open. The teams are massively different just in terms of their construction. Atlanta, for example, a much weaker team than they were in 2022 when they were one of the hottest teams, not just that season, but one of the hottest teams in baseball history. They were just unstoppable and were rising like a comet, and they just pushed the Mets aside, overtook them, and stole that division away from them in the late stages of that 2022 season. It was brutal, and it sent the Mets to the wild card, where they ended up losing to the San Diego Padres. In this case, we're dealing with a Braves team that's older, not healthy, and in terms of their offense, struggled a lot the last few weeks. They have not been able to pitch well in certain cases, and it's just hasn't been a good stretch for the Braves at all. And they struggled through what should have been an easy sweepable series for them against the Miami Marlins, but ended up only taking 2 out of 3, and that hurt them because they weren't able to make any kind of ground back on the Mets, who took 3 out of 4 from the Phillies. And it was a massive success for the Mets, who if they had been able to split the series, I would have been satisfied with it. But taking 3 out of 4 from the Phillies, massively important for them, and just a huge moment. We should also talk about Luis Angel Acuna, who continued his hot go with infield hits. Acuna now is one of 10 Mets to record 11 or more hits in his first 9 Major League games. Quite a moment for him. He is continuing his hot start in his Major League career. And Edwin Diaz, his last 13 appearances, this was a fantastic stat. So in 13 and one-third innings pitched, 13 appearances, he's allowed only 6 base hits, 1 earned run, 3 walks, 25 strikeouts, 6 saves. He's been doing outstanding for the Mets, and in a season where he's clearly not looked like 100% at all times. His fastball commands kind of got away from him at times. The slider hasn't really been working at different stages of the season. He has been electric as of late, and he hasn't been the only one. We saw great performances from Sean Panaea and Lou Severino, and David Pearson not so much on Friday, but he has been an integral part of their rotation as well. And unfortunately, we got the news earlier today that Kodai Senga will be shut down for the remainder of the season. Senga experiencing some nerve tingling in his arm that was a cause for concern. They shut him down as a precaution, just to make sure that there was nothing else wrong with Senga's arm. But it is looking more and more like a disastrous season for Kodai Senga, who has not been able to stay healthy all year, and it has hurt the Mets. They have, regardless of their depth struggles in the starting rotation, they have soldiered through, and they have responded in incredible fashion, performing well above and beyond any kind of expectations that we could have possibly thought. I don't think it was anybody's predictions that this team would win 87 games based on their construction earlier in this year. They looked like a potential 500 team, a wild card team, depending on how depending on how the regular season was going to play out. People thought there was a chance for them to be in wild card contention, but it was going to be for the 3rd spot, and then people didn't think the National League East team, none of the National League teams were going to be winning this many games. There was a lot of troubles with Milwaukee early in the year. They didn't think Milwaukee was going to be this good, and so the way it has played out has been very interesting. And the Mets' big win tonight brought them to 87 games and 87 wins this season, and sets up the remainder of their year. So they finished up their homestand, their final homestand of the season. Final 6 games are going to be played on the road in Atlanta and Milwaukee. And like I said earlier, the first game of the series is going to be between, and this will be between, so as I said earlier, the first game of the series will be, they're going to move up Luis Severino to Jose Quintana's spot in the rotation. So we will see Severino on Tuesday. He'll be taking on, it would appear to be Schwellenbach for the Braves. Great name. And then after that, it will be David Pearson taking on Chris Sale, the likely NL Cy Young winner, Chris Sale. And then finally, Sean Manaea in the 3rd game of the series, and he will likely be taking on. Well, we're not really sure actually. I'm not really. There hasn't been any sort of a prediction as to what starter is going to be pitching for Atlanta on that day, but we do know the Mets starters, so it will be Severino, Peterson, and Manaea, and that was the rotation that the Mets are hoping they were going to be going with come postseason time, should they clinch the postseason spot. And again, it could potentially be in Atlanta, depending on how many games the Mets win. But it is imperative that they take at least 2 out of 3 in this series against Atlanta. So they are going to be going for the series win. We do not know yet what exactly the case will be for Francisco Lindor, if Lindor will be healthy enough to play in that series. The initial prognosis for Lindor, as he had quoted, was going to be 3 to 5 days as of Monday, earlier last week. As we know now, he still has not been cleared to play. So if they fly down to Atlanta and he's ready for the first game of that series, it would be a huge get for them. As I mentioned before, Acuna has been playing so well in Lindor's absence that it doesn't hurt them that much, but they would like to have their best player available for what is got to be the biggest series of the season. This is unquestionably the series that the entire season is riding on. So a few things to talk about before we go. So this was a sellout crowd, 43,139 fans. There was the Black Cloud earlier this year, and I want to address this because this was probably the most infuriating thing I've seen on the internet and Twitter and Reddit the last few days, which was the complaining about attendance earlier in the week against the Washington Nationals. I unquestionably can say that this was not like a situation. People were complaining about like, oh, I can't believe people aren't showing up for those games. I have no problem with people not showing up to a Washington National Series in the middle of the week like this was not like a holiday weekend. There wasn't anything going on. People were gonna be working and going to school, and I'm not going to criticize my fans for not showing up on those games. They were games against the Washington Nationals in the middle of the week. You aren't buying tickets for that, and if people were upset about it, they're the people that had gone to the games already, or people who were just throwing a fit online just to have to throw a fit. So, in seemingly like retaliation for that, the Met fans showed up in force for this Philadelphia series, and it was a huge crowds every night. This was the second straight Citi Field sellout for the Mets. So Saturday and Sunday, both sellouts. Only 5 sellouts this season, which is where people were getting upset. But again, this was a season that the Mets were really struggling to get people to come in and be excited about the team earlier in the year. So I'm not going to criticize people for not showing up then. As the season progressed, they were playing a lot of road games. And frequently they weren't playing home games at home unless they were against teams that you wouldn't really want to go see. So again, I'm not gonna throw any kind of shade against people who were just like kind of like biding their time and throwing their support in late in the year when things got crazy and really imperative. So if people have a problem with that, honestly, keep it to yourself. It was really rude and annoying watching Met fans just kind of like turn on each other. And seeing people say like, oh, they're fake Met fans, they're not showing up to the games and the playoffs. You know what? Shut up. Like honestly, I have no patience and no desire to hear people say that. That is really it is just a chance to divide the Met fan base, and it was taken by media figures who just couldn't really resist and wanted to kind of poke the bear in this case. And I think Met fans made a very clear message back to them that in the big games that the Mets have to play, the fan base is going to show up. So, I'm sorry that it wasn't sellouts every night, but you know what? People have to work, people have to go to school, and it's expensive. And also, I'm not expect people to come to a Nationals game. I expect them to come to a Phillies game. That's a very different animal. So, absolutely ridiculous. I wanted to also talk about the crazy play in the ninth inning, which was okay. So Edwin Diaz walks Bryson Stott and sets up Stott to steal second and third base. On the throw from catcher Francisco Alvarez to third, we see an insane moment where the throw caromed off of the third base bag and flew into the air, and no one knew where it was. And that critical moment of no one really knowing where it was ended up going in the Mets' favor because Vientos had no idea where it was. And he assumed it had gone over his head or something, and that's where his first look was, until finally he noticed it was basically right in front of him. And because of that, Stott, who is extremely fast, is a great base runner, had to hold his ground, stay on third base, or else it was going to be. I honestly, I think he could have like walked into third if that ball caromed a little bit farther away and ended up in the foul territory behind Vientos. I think Stott definitely could have scored on that play. So it was just a freak moment of luck. It's just one of those things that kind of just seems to happen in the Mets every once in a while, where you're like, okay, like that could have been a game deciding play if it just bounced farther away, and that was the moment I think probably that kind of clinched it for people in their minds that okay, this Mets team is going to win. That like things are just kind of breaking their way, and it didn't matter what the Phillies were going to do in that game. The Mets were going to win it. So Diaz would walk Brandon Marsh, but would then hold the fort down and would win the game thanks to a great ninth inning performance and pitching, striking out. It was. I swear I do not know the guy's name. His name is Cody Clemens. Yeah, Cody Clemens, who is Roger Clemens' son, and it was kind of this like weird like karma moment where if at the Mets home stadium, Mets striking out a Clemens in a huge series game. So it was kind of clever to see, and Diaz pumped up. I mean, it was a huge moment. Mendoza appeared to be considering possibly taking Diaz out with one batter remaining and going to Ryan Stanek. He ultimately decided to keep Diaz in, and Diaz responded in incredible fashion. So great game from Diaz, and what has to be his signature performance of the season. It was just spectacular to see him pitch in that game, and great job by him. So Mets take 3 out of 4. We have a incredible series coming up against the Atlanta Braves. We have players who are in the middle of like great hot stretches right now. Francisco Alvarez, Brandon Nimmo, both red hot. That combined with the electric performances of Jose Iglesias and Luis Angel Acuna, Pete Alonso getting his hits in there and again. Harrison Bader and Starling Marte coming through with some base hits. The offense has been playing pretty well for the most part. But it will be a very interesting series against the Braves coming up, and we will have Chris Sale on the mound against the Mets. This will be a huge moment for a Met team taking on the likely NL Cy Young winner in Sale. So look forward to that matchup, and that will be probably the game that the Mets are not going to win. But here's hoping that the Mets have just enough magic left in them to take this series against Braves. But so here we are now with this team. They have ridden a crazy road to what has been a amazing final month in September. It's been an electric feeling watching this Mets team that just continues to win in games seemingly out of nowhere. They'll win games that in some cases they don't really have any right to win. This was a game that I wasn't totally sure if they were going to win it just because the way the offense was struggling to get guys in and wasn't really coming through in major situations. Kind of felt like Friday again, but they got through. Tyler McGill, who I haven't mentioned yet, would only go 4 innings, but it was an effective four innings and led the way to the Met bullpen, the much maligned Met bullpen, coming through in incredible fashion with Phil Maton pitching 2 fantastic scoreless innings that really helped the team. Jose Budo pitching is scoreless 7th, and then leading to Edwin Diaz pitching 2 innings of shutout relief himself. So 5 innings in total from 3 Met relievers would be sufficient for the Mets to come away with a win. So before you start saying anything about this Met bullpen, just remember against the first place team, the Philadelphia Phillies, with 3 guys, they took their 3 best relievers and said, we're going to stretch these guys over the remaining 5 innings because we got the day off on Monday, and we can we can make this work for them and potentially win this game. And they did. And it was Another great calculation from Carlos Mendoza, the Met manager, who earlier this year, I think probably people were questioning whether or not Mendoza had the stratagem in him to take on other more experienced major league managers, and was he going to outmanage himself? Was he going to deploy the bullpen in bad fashion? I cannot say enough about Carlos Mendoza and how well he has risen to the occasion and risen to the challenge of taking this Met team and getting them to this point in the season has been really incredible. My thoughts about major league managers is that it's basically the less you do wrong, the more successful you are, and it just happens that everything he kind of does, every calculation, every move he makes, things just kind of tend to work his way. Things just break his way, and it's weird watching it because rookie Met managers, you don't usually get that kind of success, and there's something to him. There's a little bit of a Bobby Valentine sort of, like, this guy has a personality that seems to mesh really well with his roster, and they like him. They seem to, even though this was his first year at the team, they didn't really have any history with him. He has very quickly earned the loyalty and respect of his players, and the NL Manager of the Year, it's going to be I think it's a toss up between him and the Milwaukee manager. I believe Stein is the name. I believe that's if I'm not mistaken. I'll check on that while I'm talking. But I do think that Mendoza has a really strong claim to it. I don't think it's really any kind of hyperbole to say that what he has done this year has been nothing short of spectacular. I've been blown away by the way that he's performed and the way he's stepped up, and it's been really amazing to watch. But it's something that you would not expect from a guy in his rookie season to come through and perform the way that he has. But just an outstanding job done by him, and if he doesn't win Manager of the Year, it's a shame. I think he does deserve it over. The name is Pat Murphy. I don't know where I got Stein from, but Pat Murphy from the Milwaukee Brewers is probably the heavy favorite, just because he similarly took a team that people weren't really expecting to win maybe more than like 81, 82 games this year, and has brought them into level contention with the Los Angeles Dodgers and Philadelphia Phillies. So the Mets continue what has been an incredible run, and for people who might say, like, oh, well, it's just a wild card appearance, whatever, it doesn't mean anything. We're only 1 year removed from watching the Arizona Diamondbacks, a team that people didn't have any expectations for making it all the way to the World Series, and I think this Met team far better than the Diamondbacks team. That Diamondbacks team was not good, and they just hit a sufficient level of momentum late in that year and had a solid September. It was enough to get them into the playoffs. They stunned multiple teams on their way to a insane final stretch where they got all the way to the World Series, only to be knocked off by the Texas Rangers. And I do look at that team. I'm like, that team didn't have a ton of pitching. Their hitting wasn't anywhere near as good as the Mets is this season. And the way that this team is, things just kind of are seeming to break for them. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that they could, if they make the postseason, and that is still that in contention. I will not say anything that they've clinched until they've actually clinched the postseason spot. I'm not going to jinx anything, but it isn't out of the realm of possibilities that you look at that team and you're like, you know what, there is enough things that maybe could break their way in a postseason stretch where, as we know, nothing makes any sense. Up is down, black is white in Major League postseason. Nobody seems to be able to perform, and everything just goes crazy. So there's, the Mets have as much of a chance as anybody. I would say pretty much everybody has a chance once the postseason starts. And in some ways that chaos makes it more entertaining. It's a little frustrating just because you don't really know how anything's going to work out. But It does set up a very intriguing scenario and something for my fans to get excited about. As I mentioned before, this was the final homestand for the Mets, and there is a lot to sort of unpack. So Pete Alonso this was his final potential homestand with the team. He got a great ovation in his final at bat, which was just like a fielder's choice ground out where he ended up on first base, but didn't really do anything. And it was just kind of those things you're like, oh, well, that was another moment this season where of Pete not really performing up to what we were hoping he would do. But it does set up this very interesting situation where if this was Alonso's last ride with the team, he goes out with a lot of fanfare. I do think Alonso will be back just because I think his options are going to be pretty limited this offseason. I've mentioned this before, so I won't go into it in depth, but I feel like he has kind of cost himself a lot of money with his up and down performance, and this final season is just not going to it's not going to be a great taste in people's mouths. So either I think he takes the qualifying offer that the Mets are going to send his way once his contract expires, or they're just going to come to they'll come to a contract extension with Alonso. I do think that was the most likely scenario of anything happening here. So that was that. And finishing up the homestand for the Met fans, it's bittersweet. We don't know if we're going to see this team again. It's been an electric ride. I'm going to try and do as many podcast episodes over these last 6 games as I can, because what has started off as a terrible year where things were going badly, the team started off 0-5, and it didn't look like this team had really a puncher's chance in hell of making their way through anybody, and the pitching was going to be terrible, and the offense was going to be terrible, and everything was going to be terrible, and they've risen back in incredible fashion. It's not an exaggeration to say that this has been the hottest team in baseball the last 60 plus games. I mean, it's been insane the way that they have performed. They have been one of the best teams in baseball, and it's shocked a lot of people. A lot of people did not see it coming that this team would be in the middle of contention and would win 87 games. I certainly didn't see it early in the year. I had a very bleak outlook on it, I admit. And the way that they've risen back, they've become one of my favorite teams ever. It's been stunning to see, and it just goes to show like the level of camaraderie and chemistry that this team has. It's very inspiring, and I do love the way that they perform. So I'm hoping we could see more baseball from this team, just because they've been so entertaining over this final stretch, and they've performed admirably. They've excelled in every fashion, and what I want to see is for that incredible performance to get rewarded with a postseason spot, and for Met fans to get a little bit more baseball this year and let it ride. Let's see how far this thing can go, and everybody should be tuning in for that Atlanta series. We're going to be waiting with eager anticipation to see if this Mets team can put away this Braves team and send them away finally and clinch a postseason spot. So one hell of a series coming up. Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.